Hi friends, it's Betty here from Easy Bloom Garden. If you love having flowers around but just do not have the energy for a high-maintenance garden anymore, you are in the right place. Today, we're talking about some beautiful, easygoing flowers that can keep your yard, porch, or patio looking cheerful without asking so much from you. These are the kinds of blooms that can handle a little real life and still show up beautifully. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's look at some lovely flowers that can make gardening feel lighter and a whole lot more enjoyable. Some days, you still want your yard or porch to look bright and cared for, but you do not have the energy to spend half the afternoon watering, trimming, and fussing over plants that act dramatic the minute the weather changes. That is where the right flowers can make such a difference. Some bloomers ask for constant attention. Others settle in, handle heat better, forgive missed watering better, and keep showing up without making you feel like gardening is another full-time job. If you like easy garden ideas that make life feel lighter and still leave you with something beautiful to look at, subscribe and keep this channel close by. The flowers we are talking about here are not magic, and they are not completely carefree, but they are the kinds of plants that give back far more than they demand. Some are great for sunny beds. Some work beautifully along walkways or fences. Some can brighten a patio in pots, though container flowers usually need a little more watering than plants in the ground. The big idea is simple. If you are tired, busy, older, or just done wasting money on plants that fade fast, these are the flowers that can help your garden carry itself better. One of the strongest places to start is daylilies. Daylilies come in warm yellows, oranges, reds, pinks, and soft cream shades. And once they are established, they are usually very forgiving. They handle heat well, they come back year after year in many climates. And their strappy green leaves keep beds looking full even when individual blooms come and go. That matters when you are tired, because a flower bed looks better when the plant itself has presence, not just the blossom. Daylilies work especially well along borders, driveways, mailboxes, and sunny fence lines, where you want a neat burst of color without turning that space into a needy project. They do best with decent sun and do not love soggy soil, but once settled in, they can handle a lot more than people expect. The one thing to keep in mind is that some types spread over time, which can be a benefit if you want fuller clumps. But every few years, you may want to divide them to keep them performing well. Even that is still a small price to pay for a flower that gives so much color without acting fragile. If daylilies are the dependable workers of a low-effort garden, black-eyed Susans are the cheerful ones. These bright yellow flowers with dark centers have a way of making a flower bed look sunny and alive, even in the hardest stretch of summer. They are one of the easiest ways to make a garden feel lively without piling on extra chores. Once established, they often handle dry spells reasonably well, and they do not need the kind of pampering that many nursery favorites seem to expect. Black-eyed Susans are especially useful if you have a patch of yard that feels a little empty, flat or washed out in midsummer. Their shape stands out, their color reads from a distance, and they mix well with ornamental grasses and other easy perennials. They also tend to attract pollinators, which makes the garden feel more active without any work from you. In very rich soil, they can get a little taller than expected, and in some areas they may reseed. For many gardeners, that is not a problem at all. It just means more flowers filling in space that would otherwise need mulch, edging, or extra planting. Do you prefer flowers that look bold and bright from across the yard? Or do you like softer colors closer to a porch or sitting area? That one choice can change the whole feel of your garden. Another flower that earns its place in a tired gardener's yard is coneflower, also called echinacea. Coneflowers have a sturdy, upright look that feels reliable. They bloom in pink, purple, white, orange, and other shades depending on the variety. And they tend to keep going through warm weather when fussier plants start looking worn out. They are a strong choice for sunny beds, cottage-style borders, and mixed plantings where you want long-lasting color. That does not collapse the first time the week gets hot and busy. What makes coneflowers so helpful is that they do not just bloom, they hold their shape well. Even when the flowers begin to age, the seed heads can still add texture, and birds often enjoy them later. That means the plant keeps giving something back. Coneflowers usually like full sun and soil that drains reasonably well. They are not the flower for heavy wet ground, but in the right place. They often become one of the easiest plants in the yard to live with. You plant them, give them time to establish, and then they settle into a rhythm that feels refreshingly manageable. A softer but equally helpful option is coreopsis. This is one of those flowers that can lighten up a bed without making it feel stiff or crowded. Many coreopsis varieties produce cheerful yellow blooms, though some lean into gold, orange, or even reddish tones. The plant has an easy, airy feel, and it works well if you want the garden to look colorful but not heavy. That is a big plus for smaller front beds, and it is also perfect for mailbox plantings, or sunny corners that need life without becoming cluttered. Coreopsis is often a strong choice for people who want long bloom time and less trouble. It tends to like sunshine, and once established, it can often handle heat fairly well. Some gardeners trim it lightly after a big flush of flowers to encourage another round. But even without perfect care, it usually gives a good showing. The main thing is not to place it where the soil stays wet for too long. It is happier in a spot that drains well and lets the roots breathe. This is also where many gardeners begin to see the real shift in how an easier garden comes together. It is not only about picking flowers that survive, it is about choosing flowers that fill space nicely, carry color for a long stretch, and still look respectable when life gets busy. Daylilies give you dependable clumps and repeat beauty. Black-eyed Susans bring brightness and energy. Coneflowers offer sturdy color with a longer season of interest. Coreopsis softens the whole picture while still holding its own in summer heat. Once you start building with flowers like these, the garden begins to feel less like a list of chores and more like something that works with you. And that becomes even more helpful when the next few flowers add color, shape, and staying power, without asking you to hover over them every weekend. Once you have a few dependable flowers in place, the next step is choosing the ones that keep color going without making you feel tied to a watering can or a pair of garden scissors. This is where a lot of gardeners get disappointed because some flowers look wonderful for a short time and then start asking for more attention than they are worth. But a few reliable bloomers can keep the garden lively for weeks and still fit real life. Even if you miss a day, get busy, or simply do not feel like working outside in the heat. A perfect example is catmint. If you have ever seen a soft mound of gray-green foliage covered in lavender blue flowers, there is a good chance you are looking at catmint. This plant has a relaxed, full shape that makes the whole garden feel softer and more finished. It is especially useful along borders, paths, and the front edges of beds where you want something to spill out a little and make the space feel generous instead of bare. What makes catmint so appealing is how little drama it brings. Once established, it often handles dry conditions quite well, and it does not usually need the constant babying that some flowering plants do. It loves sun, appreciates well-drained soil, and can keep blooming for a long stretch. Some gardeners shear it lightly after its first big bloom, and that can encourage a fresh wave of flowers. But even when you are not perfectly on schedule, it still tends to look attractive. The foliage itself is a bonus too. Even when the flowers pause, the plant still has a calm, silvery presence that keeps the bed from looking empty. If you like flowers that bring stronger color and can handle harder conditions, blanket flower is another smart choice. Blanket flower has warm shades that often mix yellow, orange, red, and rust tones, and it thrives in places where many other flowers would pout. Hot sun, lean soil, and dry spells do not usually scare it off. In fact, it often performs better when it is not spoiled with overly rich conditions. That alone can save a tired gardener a lot of frustration. Blanket flower works especially well in sunny borders, gravelly areas, and low-maintenance beds where you want something bright but tough. Its daisy-like blooms bring a cheerful, almost glowing look to the garden, and they do a good job of keeping the bed colorful through the hotter months. One caution is that it prefers soil that drains well. If you have a heavy, wet area, it may not be the happiest plant there. but in the right spot, it often keeps blooming without asking for much in return. These warmer flowers can do a lot for a summer bed. But sometimes what a garden really needs is a plant that looks solid and attractive even before it blooms. That is where sedum, also called stonecrop, really earns its space. Sedum is one of those plants that quietly makes gardening easier. Its leaves are thick and fleshy, which helps it hold onto moisture better than many other plants. That means it often handles dry stretches with far less complaint. For anyone tired of watching plants wilt every time the weather gets hot, that is a very welcome trait. Many garden sedums form tidy mounds of attractive foliage and then bloom later in the season with clusters of pink, rose, or reddish flowers. That late burst of color is helpful because it carries the garden into a time of year when some early bloomers are already fading. Sedum looks great in sunny beds, rock gardens, and borders where you want a clean, sturdy shape. It also mixes beautifully with coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, and ornamental grasses. The main thing to remember is that sedum likes good drainage. It is not built for wet feet. In a dry, sunny area, though, it can be one of the easiest plants you ever grow. Do you garden mostly in full sun, deep shade, or a mix of both? That one detail can decide which flowers feel easy for you and which ones keep turning into work. Another flower that gives a lot without demanding much is salvia. This is a favorite for many gardeners because it has such a neat, upright shape and brings rich color into the garden without looking floppy or fussy. Depending on the variety, salvia can bloom in shades of purple, blue, red, pink, or white. The flower spikes rise above the foliage and add a nice vertical line, which helps break up the rounded shapes of plants like catmint and sedum. Salvia is especially useful in sunny beds where you want color that stands tall and keeps the planting from looking too flat. Another flower that gives a lot without demanding much is salvia, ensuring your garden stays vibrant with minimal effort. It is also a strong pollinator plant, which means bees and butterflies often visit it. That gives the garden even more life without requiring anything extra from you. Once established, many salvias handle warm weather and moderate dry spells quite well. If you trim spent flower spikes, you can often encourage more blooms. But even if you are not perfectly consistent, salvia still tends to pull its weight. One thing that makes these 4 flowers so valuable is the way they solve different problems without increasing your workload. Catmint softens edges and fills the front of a bed. Blanket flower gives you hot weather color in tougher spots. Sedum adds structure and late-season interest while shrugging off dry conditions. Salvia brings height and color without acting delicate. Together, they help the garden feel layered, lively, and steady. This is where an easier garden starts looking more intentional. Instead of scattering random flowers and hoping for the best, you begin choosing plants that each do a job well. Some cool the look of the bed with softer blues and silvers, some warm it up with bright summer shades, some carry the color later into the season. Some keep their shape beautifully even when they are not in full bloom. That is how a garden starts working for you, rather than asking you to rescue it over and over. And once the sunny workhorses are doing their part, it becomes much easier to think about the flowers that can brighten pots, porches, and smaller spaces, without turning every container into one more thing to manage. Once a garden starts feeling manageable in the ground, many people want that same easy color near the house too. That is where containers, porch pots, small borders, and front entry plantings come in. The trouble is that these spots can become surprisingly demanding if you fill them with flowers that need constant grooming or wilt the moment the soil dries out. Pots almost always dry faster than flower beds, so even low-maintenance flowers may need more frequent watering in containers. Still, some choices give you a lot more beauty for the effort, and that makes a huge difference when your energy is limited. One of the most useful flowers for this is geranium, especially the common garden geranium people often use in porch pots and window boxes. Geraniums have a simple strength to them. The leaves stay attractive. The blooms come in clear, cheerful colors like red, pink, salmon, and white, and the plants do a very good job of making a container look full and intentional. If you want a front step, patio table, or porch rail to feel bright and welcoming, Without creating a big maintenance routine, geraniums are often one of the easiest ways to do it. What helps geraniums so much is that they tolerate a little real life. They like sun, and they appreciate regular watering in pots. But they are not usually as fragile as some flowering annuals. They can handle warmth well, and they keep a neat shape. Pinching off old blooms helps them stay tidy. But even when you are not perfectly on top of every faded flower, they still tend to look respectable. That matters when the goal is not perfection. The goal is steady color that does not add stress. If you enjoy bolder color and want something easy to grow from seed, zinnias deserve a place on the list. Zinnias are one of the best flowers for gardeners who want quick reward without complicated care. They come in bright pinks, oranges, reds, yellows, whites, and deeper shades that can almost look painted. Their upright stems and strong flower heads make them stand out in beds and containers, and they bloom through warm weather in a way that feels generous. Zinnias are annuals, so they do not come back year after year the way perennials do. But they often make up for that by blooming hard during the season. They love sunshine, they do not ask for rich pampering, and they are one of the easiest flowers for adding a lively, colorful look to a summer garden. Good airflow matters, though. If they are crowded too tightly or left in damp conditions too often, they can struggle with mildew. So the easy fix is simple. Give them sun, give them space, and water the soil more than the leaves when you can. In return, they do a lot of visual work. For a softer, more traditional pop of color, marigolds are still worth talking about. Some people think of marigolds as too ordinary, but that can make them easy to overlook. The truth is, they are popular for a reason. Marigolds are cheerful, practical, and usually very easy to grow. They come in sunny shades of yellow, gold, orange, and deep rust. And they fit beautifully into borders, vegetable gardens, patio pots, and front beds where you want dependable color that does not feel demanding. Marigolds are especially useful for gardeners who want something straightforward. They grow fairly quickly, bloom generously, and handle summer heat better than many flowers people pay much more for. Taller varieties can add height to a mixed bed, while compact ones are great for edging and containers. They still like regular water, especially in pots, but they are generally forgiving. Some gardeners trim old flowers to keep the display going strong, but even without constant fussing, marigolds usually stay bright and useful. If your garden needs something tougher and more lasting, yarrow can be a wonderful choice. Yarrow has flat-topped flower clusters that sit above soft, feathery foliage, and it brings a different texture than the rounder, daisy-like flowers on this list. It often blooms in shades of yellow, white, pink, peach, or red, depending on the variety, and it fits especially well in sunny, drier areas where you want something resilient. Yarrow is one of those flowers that tends to make sense for people who are tired of babying plants through summer. Once established, it often handles dry conditions very well, and it can keep looking good in spots where thirstier flowers would struggle. It is especially helpful in cottage-style plantings, low-water borders, and sunny beds that need a little lift. The caution with yarrow is that in the right conditions, it can spread. For some gardeners, that is a plus because it fills space. For others, it means they may need to thin it once in a while. Either way, it earns respect for how much it gives back with so little fuss. Have you had better luck with flowers in the ground or flowers in pots? For many gardeners, that answer changes with the season and how much walking, bending, and watering they want to do. These 4 flowers are useful because they meet different needs without turning into high-maintenance projects. Geraniums bring dependable porch and patio color. Zinnias give bright, showy blooms with simple care. Marigolds add a familiar burst of warmth in beds and containers. Yarrow offers a tougher perennial option for sunnier, drier spots. This is the kind of mix that helps a garden feel flexible. You are not forced into one look or one kind of space. You can brighten a front step, fill a border, or patch color into a tired corner without committing yourself to more work than you want. That flexibility becomes even more important when you start looking at the last group of flowers, because not every easy garden is baked in full sun. Some of the most relaxing planting areas are shaded porches, cool side yards, and spots that need soft beauty more than bold, heat-loving color. Not every tired gardener is working with a blazing hot flower bed out in the open sun. Some of the most difficult spots are actually the quieter ones. A shady side yard, a porch that only gets morning light, a bed under a tree, or a cool corner near the house can leave people feeling stuck, because so many popular flowers want full sun and constant blooming. But an easier garden is not only about bright summer color, it is also about choosing plants that suit the space you already have, so you are not fighting nature every weekend. That is why hostas deserve more appreciation than they sometimes get. Most people think of hostas for their leaves first, and that makes sense. Their broad foliage comes in greens, blue-greens, and variegated patterns that instantly make a shady spot feel fuller and calmer. But many hostas also send up lovely flowers on tall stems, usually in shades of pale lavender, purple, or white. Those blooms may not be the flashiest on this list, but they add a soft, graceful layer that works beautifully in shade. What makes hostas especially helpful is that they do a lot of visual work without needing much from you once they are established. They are ideal for shady beds, underplanting around porches, and spots where grass never seems happy. Instead of forcing sun-loving flowers into the wrong place, hostas let you lean into shade and make it look intentional. They do like moisture better than some drought-tolerant plants on this list, especially when getting started. And slugs can be a problem in some gardens. But in the right location, hostas can be one of the easiest ways to make a neglected shady area feel lush again. If you want a shade-friendly flower with a softer, more romantic look, a stilbe is another strong option. A stilbe has feathery plumes that rise above attractive foliage, and those blooms can come in white, pink, red, peach, and soft lavender tones. The texture alone makes it valuable. In a garden full of bold, round, sunny flowers, a stilbe brings something looser and gentler. It works especially well in shaded or partly shaded beds where you want a little lift without harsh color or stiff form. A stilbe is best for gardeners who have a cooler, moister area and want something that looks delicate without being impossible. It does not love dry, hot conditions, so this is not the flower to force into a baking front border. But if you have a spot that stays more evenly moist, a stilbe can be surprisingly rewarding. It helps soften foundations, brighten a shaded walkway, and bring movement into a bed that might otherwise feel flat. That is one of the simplest ways to make gardening easier. Stop trying to make every plant fit every place. The more the flower suits the spot, the less work it usually becomes. Then there is Russian sage, which moves us right back into the sun, but in a much looser, airier way than many summer flowers. Russian sage has silvery stems, narrow gray-green foliage, and clouds of lavender-blue blooms that create a hazy softness rather than a heavy block of color. If you have a dry, sunny bed and you want beauty without constant watering and pampering, this is one of the most useful plants to know about. Russian sage is especially effective when the garden needs height and movement. It looks beautiful behind lower perennials, along fences near mailboxes, or in wide sunny borders where a more structured flower might feel stiff. Once established, it often handles heat and drier conditions very well, which makes it a favorite for gardeners who are tired of watching plants collapse in summer. The main caution is space. Russian sage can get fairly large, and if it is squeezed into a tight bed, it can overwhelm smaller neighbors. But when given room, it adds that breezy, effortless look so many people want. These last three flowers say something important about low-effort gardening. The easiest garden is not always the one with the fewest plants. It is the one where each plant fits its job. Hostas fill shade with calm, generous foliage and soft flowers. A stilbe brings lightness to cooler, moister spots. Russian sage handles the bright, dry places with a relaxed, airy presence. None of them are trying to be everything. They are simply doing what they do well. And that really is the heart of an easier flower garden. You do not need every flower bed packed with demanding plants. You do not need a long shopping list of rare varieties. You do not need to rework the whole yard in one exhausting weekend. Most of the time, what helps most is choosing flowers that match your conditions and your energy level. That may mean relying on daylilies, coneflowers, and black-eyed Susans in sunny beds. It may mean using catmint, salvia, and sedum where heat and dry spells are common. It may mean keeping geraniums and marigolds near the front door where a little color goes a long way. Or it may mean finally giving that shaded corner over to hostas and astilbe instead of fighting it year after year. If you are not sure where to begin, the easiest plan is often the best one. Start with one area you actually see every day. That could be the front porch, the mailbox bed, the path to the driveway, or the small border outside a kitchen window. Pick just 2 or 3 flowers that fit that space well. Choose sun lovers for sun, shade lovers for shade, and remember that containers usually dry out faster than the ground. That one small change can make the whole garden feel more hopeful because success is easier to build on than frustration. You may also notice that a low-effort garden often looks calmer and better put together than a high-maintenance one that is always half-finished. When flowers are chosen well, they fill in naturally, repeat themselves nicely, and stop asking you to rescue them every few days. That means less dragging hoses around, less replacing dead plants, less second-guessing, and less money wasted on flowers that looked good for one weekend and then faded out. If this gave you a few easier ideas for your own yard, subscribe for more practical gardening help. That keeps things simple and beautiful without making the work feel heavier. The best flower garden does not have to be the fanciest one on the block. Sometimes the best one is the one that still looks welcoming when you are tired, busy, or moving a little slower than you used to. And when the flowers do more of the work for you, the garden starts feeling like a place to enjoy again, not just another chore waiting outside.